Yeah, thanks, Theo. And I suppose I'll just quickly share a little bit of my sort of COVID experience. I think I've been sort of a lucky one in our industry that I've got some UK customers that I've been able to go and visit their farms at. So I know Sanjay mentioned he misses seeing his chickens, and but I've been lucky. I've been able to see some chickens over the last few months. So I'm quite happy about that. Okay, so I'm going to start off the technical presentations for us today, and I'm going to be talking about a very important topic, probably the most important topic for broilers, and that is brooding and brooding for optimum performance. So I'm going to get straight into it, and basically the presentation outline. We're going to start off by talking about why it's all about getting a good start in that first week, how important that first week is. We'll look a little bit in uniformity and how brooding affects uniformity. And then we'll move into the 5 principles of brooding, which are namely feed, water, lighting, air quality, and temperature. Okay, so for those of you who have potentially been farming for a long time, 20, 30 years, will have noticed that the broiler of today is a lot bigger than it was sort of 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. And what that means is, in terms of the amount of days that it takes to get that broiler to 2 kgs compared to what it took 20 or 30 years ago, has drastically reduced. So the proportion of the first week has increased in the terms of the total age that bird before it's killed. And that means that that first week is really, really important to get right. There's not enough time to catch up later on. So it's a sprint nowadays. It's no longer a marathon. And you can have a bad start in a sprint and you still finish with a good time. If you're an Olympic sprinter, you might not get sub 10 seconds, but you'll get to sort of 10 seconds or 11 seconds. And that's a good time, but you're not going to win the race. And it's the same with the broilers. You can have a bad start in the beginning and you can still finish with a good result. However, it's never going to be as good as it could have been if you got a very good start in that first week. So our bird has all the potential to do well, to win that sprint, to be the Usain Bolt, and we just need to provide the correct environment for it to be able to achieve that potential. So basically what we need to do is we need to do a really good job, and we need to be a good mother hen to these chicks when they arrive at our farm. So the importance of the first week, the first 7 days is extremely critical. You want to achieve adequate growth in that first week. And what we talk about is you want to achieve 4.6 times the day-old weight by day 7. So that lets you know that you've got good growth. It's also the period where the bird's most efficient. So it's got the best feed conversion ratio, and that's a sort of a ratio of about 1 to 1, almost a little bit better. So every 1 gram of feed that it eats, it's putting on almost sort of 1.1 grams of body weight within those first few days. So we want to take advantage of that period. This is also where you get a period where you get good development of the internal organs, of the musculoskeletal system, and of the gastrointestinal tract, as well as seeding the gut microbiota, which is becoming a very important topic when talking about poultry and broilers these days. You want to make sure that you get good gut microbiota to get good performance, and that all starts within that first week. Temperature regulation is not really fully functional in their chicks in the first week, and their immune system is still developing. So basically, they're very vulnerable in that first week, and that's why we need to take care of them and make sure they get that good start. So just to show you a sort of a good image to show that organ and gut development, over here you can see at day 1, this is the digestive tract, there's the heart, and this is the liver. And you can see within the first 7 days just how much growth there is in that digestive tract, in the liver, and in the heart. You can see the difference in size. So that's what we want to achieve. If you think about it, in that 7-day body weight, the birds aren't depositing a lot of breast muscle tissue or other muscle tissue. most of that weight is coming from the development of the skeletal structure of the internal organs, and that's what we want to achieve, that 4.6 growth. So uniformity. So uniformity starts within that first hour that those chicks are placed on the farm, and brooding has a very big influence on it. It's very difficult to correct later on in the cycle if you get it wrong in that first week. If your uniformity is good, we all know that management is a lot less challenging. So, you know, managing your drinker line heights and your feeder pan heights, it all becomes a lot easier when you've got a nice uniform flock. So what we want is we want to achieve a coefficient of variation, or a CV at placement, of around 7 to 6. So that's coming from the hatchery. And then at the end of the cycle, if you've got a CV of around 10% or less, then that's what we consider a well-uniform flock. So your brooding needs to be faultless in order to get that good uniformity. So here's just some data from a trial farm. And it's basically, we've got the 7-day body weights at the bottom over here. And we can see that the CV, or the coefficient of variation at day old, was 7.24, which is great. That's where we want to be, between 7 and 8. However, at day 7, it's already at 13.81. So a very ununiform flock that we see over there. And you're going to have a lot of heavy birds on this side, sort of 14% over here, above 200 grams. And then there's a whole bunch at the bottom end, the 12% at the bottom here, that are really light. And we don't really want to worry about this group at the top, these heavy birds. We want to concentrate on these smaller birds. That's what brooding should be aimed at, the smaller, weaker chicks. We want to move them more into this area, and that's going to get better uniformity and better performance. So some best practices when the chicks first arrive at your farm. Firstly, you want to know the correct day-old weight. So you want to measure them and get a test weight when they arrive on the farm. So you want to weigh at least 100 chicks. You can do them individually so that you can calculate your CV. You can see what your uniformity is at day 0, and then you can do it again at day 7 and compare to make sure that you're doing brooding correctly, and that's not where the uniformity issue is. You can also then use your day 0 weight and your day 7 weight to get your first week growth ratio. So you just divide your day 7 weight by your day 0 body weight. And then again, if you get 4.6 or more, that shows that you've got a good start and you've done brooding quite well. Whereas if it's less than 4.6, it's not an ideal start, and you need to reassess some of your brooding principles. So just to show you some data, this is 102 million broilers worth of data, and what we can see is a really good relationship between feed conversion and ADG, and depending on the 7-day body weight. So as the 7-day body weight increases, what we see is average daily gain, this orange line, increasing, and we see feed conversion decreasing. So a very nice linear relationship there. The better your 7-day body weights, the better ADGs you're going to get at the end of the cycle, and the lower your feed conversions. And that's what we that's what we all want. So in this example, for every 10 grams increase in 7-day body weight, that resulted in 1.4% higher average daily gain and 1% lower feed conversion. Okay, so moving on to the 5 principles of brooding, and we've come up with my boss Nigel, he's come up with a nice sort of acronym to remember the 5 principles by, and we call it the sort of fault system. And you want brooding to be faultless within that first week. So what the fault stands for is, the F is for feed intake, and this is the main reason for poor performance if you don't get good feed intake in that first week. A is air quality. You want to make sure you meet the bird's requirements. W for water intake, and that's often the most forgotten nutrient. However, it is extremely important that you get water. Right, so feed intake, as I mentioned, it's one of the main reasons you get poor performance if you don't get good early feed intake. So the goal of brooding is we want to stimulate that early feed intake as much as possible. And we're looking for the chicks to consume around sort of 25% of their own body weight in that first 24 hours. So 42-gram chick, you're looking at around sort of 11 grams or so that they need to consume of feed within that first day. So firstly, you need to make sure there's enough feed. So you want to make sure there's enough paper placed on the floor and lots of feed on the paper. And we recommend sort of 75 grams per chick to be placed. on that paper. So the feed pans need to be flat on the ground and they need to be flooded with feed. Then the feed on the paper, you don't want it to run out by day 2 or day 3. You want it to last at least sort of 4 days or so. So after the first week, you can then gradually increase your feeder pan heights as the birds grow. And you want to make sure that those feeder pans always have feed in them. They should never run empty. Right, so I'm going to play this little video. Hopefully it might be a little bit jumpy for you. I know Zoom doesn't play the best video quality, but what can you sort of notice from this video, if we're looking at these feeder pans, is that there's no chicks in them. So there's chicks all around, but there's no chicks inside those feeder pans. And that's basically because the chicks cannot get into those feeder pans. So here's just an example of a feeder pan that's got a high lip or a high brim. What this farmer did was push up some of the shavings around the pan and just makes it nice and easy for the chicks to get into those pans and get into the feed. You want to make it as easy as possible for those smaller, weaker chicks. Secondly, you want to make sure that you clean out your feeder systems in between cycles. So you don't want any old feed left in the feeder bins or left in the feeder pipes or inside the feeder pans when you place those chicks during brooding, because that feed can get old, it can get moldy, there can be all sorts of mycotoxins or whatever else can form in the feed. And I read a study very recently that showed that even below sort of par mycotoxin levels in the feed can have very drastic impacts on broiler performance. So we want to make sure that there's no old feed in the pans and it's all fresh, new starter crumb. Okay, so here's another option just to show you. This feed has been really overflown on these feeder pans and they've put the paper underneath the pans, and that also makes it nice and easy for the chicks to access that feed. In this picture let me get my pointer. Well, this picture, I sort of first walked into this house and thought that they didn't actually put paper in this house, that they just poured the feed onto the litter. But after moving some of the feed, you can see there is paper there. We don't need you to go to this extreme. We don't want you to waste any sort of feed to the litter, but you do need to put a good amount on. So here are some nice pictures just showing some 50% of the brooding area covered in paper, a paper right next to the drinker lines, so it's easy access for the birds to drink and to eat, and nice and flooded with feed. Feeder pans flooded, lots of feed on the paper, and right next to each of the drinker lines. This is what we don't want. They've got paper down and feed, but there's no feed in the feeder pans. Okay, you make sure that they are flooded. Just another video. So they've put paper down on the floor and there's feed in the feeder pans, but you can see the chicks are pecking around, and that's just litter, just sunflower husks. There's no feed for them to eat. So they're looking for the feed, but there's none available. This is not what we want. Okay, so early consumption. Once the chicks have eaten, digestion is going to start, heat production is going to start, the risk of them being too cold is going to be reduced, and their temperature control slowly starts to begin. However, if there's no feed eaten, then there's going to be no heat production for those chicks. They're going to have lower body temperatures, and that's going to lead to more cold chicks. And then their thermocompetence is going to be delayed for a little bit longer, and they're going to have less developed digestive tracts, and they're going to be a little bit more vulnerable. So we want to make sure that they get that initial feed intake. So this might be a little bit dark for some of you to see, but this was a very good picture that was taken in, I think, the Western Cape. And what we can see is that there's paper on the floor, but there's not a lot of feed on this paper. And this was sort of a day after placement. However, over here where there's feeder pans, there were chicks, or feed available to the chicks, and we measured their internal body temperatures, 40.5, exactly where we want it. However, these chicks where there was no paper feed on the paper, 37 degrees Celsius. So you can just see that once they get that initial feed intake, they're going to start developing that thermocompetence. There's going to be some heat production, and they're going to be more chance of that chick being a good quality chick and starting well, rather than being a cold chick if its temperature is too low. Okay, so we did a trial as well at our cob trial farm for the first 4 days, because we get a lot of complaints saying from customers going, well, they don't want to put 75 grams on the paper. They would rather put 20 grams or 30 grams because they don't want to waste any feed. So what we saw in this trial is that, yes, there was a little bit of extra feed lost to the paper, 10 grams opposed to 5 grams. However, what we saw is 40% better growth in the first 4 days from the chicks that had 70 grams per chick on the paper compared to those that had 35. And this one, every gram above 160 at 7 days was 7 grams extra at 37 days. So you want to achieve that 4.6 ounce a day-old chick weight by day 7. Okay, moving on to water. So as I mentioned, it's often the most sort of forgotten nutrient. However, it is very, very important. So it's involved in every aspect of metabolism. It's involved in digestion, the transfer of nutrients, eliminating body wastes and removing toxins, and regulating the body temperature and heat dispersion. So brooding chicks, you want them to consume about 24 mils in that first day per chick. You don't want to fail to achieve this. What we need to remember is that it's the bird's water consumption that drives their feed consumption. And they consume roughly around sort of twice, they consume about twice the amount of water compared to if you have poor water quality and or poor water management, that is going to lead to poor uniformity and poor performance. So this just is a nice sort of graph from the University of Georgia, which illustrates that relationship between feed and water intake quite nicely. So you can see the blue line, that is the water consumption, and this is over 3 days. And the brown line is for feed. So you can see they wake up in the morning and there's a spike in water consumption and a spike in feed consumption. And then just before the lights go off in the evening, there's another increase in water consumption and an increase in feed consumption. You can just see how they follow each other. Okay, so when it comes to water intake and hygiene, we need to remember that when these chicks sort of first arrive at the farm, they've got undeveloped digestive systems because they haven't had raw feed through them yet. And what we see is the gut cells within the digestive tract, they have these sort of gap junctions or these gaps in between the cells. And what can happen then is if you've got some bad water or dirty water or bacteria or any sort of bugs in the water, they can then easily pass through these gut cells and get into the bloodstream. And that can cause a lot of issues for you later on in the cycle and early on in the cycle. So we need to make sure that the water is clean. So when that chick arrives at the farm, once it's eaten and its gut cells start to grow and they start to form what we call these tight junctions, which will then prevent any bacteria from passing through the gut into the bloodstream, that the water they consume within those first few days is nice and clean. Okay, so it's a simple rule when it comes to water hygiene. If it isn't good enough for us to drink, then it's not good enough for our birds to drink. So which one would you choose? So here we've got 3 pictures and we can see we've got a glass here that looks, I probably wouldn't choose that one. That one looks a lot better to me. And this one also looks a little bit dirty, and that looks like a nice clean glass of water. So I'd probably choose this one and this one. However, that might not be the right choice. We don't really know which water is actually dirty or not. We need to look at our water. We need to test it and to know if we've got clean water or if we've got dirty water. Water is the perfect environment. So water is perfect for carrying health challenges, bacteria and viruses, and protozoa, and our poultry drinking systems can easily be contaminated. So the water is slow moving and it's warm within that first week during brooding. The water lines have many sort of hiding places and pinch points, and they contain some food that the organisms need to thrive on. So we add vitamins sometimes and organic acids, and the bacteria can use this as nutrients and grow and proliferate in our poultry drinker lines, which can cause issues to our birds. You've got to think about it, the sort of, if you get a cold or a flu, You know, these viruses, they like a sort of warm, moist tube, like our respiratory tracts. When we get a cold or a flu, it really attacks the sort of throat and the nose and the chest. And a poultry drinking line is a warm, moist tube. So it's the perfect environment for these bacteria and viruses. And they become even more dangerous when they're in the presence of a biofilm. Okay, so you need to test your water, test it at the source, test it for mineral content and bacterial content at least once per year, but more regularly would be better. So twice a year would be good. And you need to clean your systems at turnaround. So we recommend using a 50% hydrogen peroxide product stabilized with silver nitrate. That seems to work very well to make sure that cleans all the biofilm and you have nice clean drinker lines before chicks are placed. And then you want to maintain clean drinking systems during the crop. So you want to flush regularly, at least 3 times per week, and within the first few days, at least 3 times per day during that brooding when it's warm in the house. You want to flush at least with at least 1.5 bars of pressure to make sure that it removes any of that biofilm, and for around about 2 seconds per meter of drinker line. And then you can do in-crop treatment of the water, and often people use sort of a good example is chlorine. So there's been progression from sort of open water systems to closed water systems, and this has greatly benefited the broilers. So there's less contamination of our drinker systems from going from the bell drinkers now going into the drinker lines or the nipple drinker systems. So greatly benefited the broilers. However, it's out of sight now and out of mind. We can't see the water, so we take it for granted that it's clean. So we mustn't do that. We must always have a look and test it. Mustn't assume that the quality is always good. So we need to test it, we need to treat it, and we need to flush it. So just another video just to show what a really dirty drinker line looks like with biofilm. So this drinker line has never been, I would say, has never been cleaned properly between cycles with hydrogen peroxide. And we can see that it's very dirty, lots of biofilm, and probably a lot of bacteria and microbes within that biofilm that are going to cause issues to broiler performance. So this is what we want it to look like. We want it to be nice and clean, the inner surface, around the nipple, very spotless and clean before those chicks are placed during brooding. Okay, so you want to clean your drinking system to turn around. You want to make sure that you have the right concentration of the effective cleaner and left in for the right amount of time. We recommend at least 24 hours for hydrogen peroxide. You want to make sure that you clean the whole system, the water lines, the stand pipes, the regulators, the distribution pipes, everything. Make sure that it's all nice and clean. And as I mentioned before, we recommend 50% hydrogen peroxide, stabilized with silver nitrate, and made up to around about 3% solution in line. And that seems to give the best results to make sure that those lines are always clean. It's very important as well that when you've got the acid inside the drinker lines, that you activate your nipples. And that's because within these nipples, there are little pinch points or hiding places in between the mechanisms over here where bacteria can sit, and once you activate those nipples with the acid in the lines, then the acid can get in there and make sure that's clean, so that when you place the chicks, if it hasn't been cleaned or hasn't been activated, that the first time they activate that nipple, they don't get bacteria into their system. Okay, important to activate those nipples. Flushing, you want to make sure you flush at least sort of 2 to 3 times per week. And then during brooding, you want to do about 3 times per day. And if it's also warm weather, you want to make sure that you do it as regular as possible to keep the temperature down. As I mentioned, 2 seconds per meter of drinking line at 1.5 to 2 bars of pressure. So an example, if you've got a 60-meter long drinking line, that needs around about 2 minutes of flushing time. And then you want to flush as often as necessary to try and maintain water temperatures below 25 degrees Celsius. Right, and it's also about getting the basics right during brooding with your drinker heights. So make sure that at day 1 that those chicks can see the nipple. It's at chick eye height, and it's easy for them to access and find that water as soon as they're placed. And then later on, you can increase the height of the drinker line so that they drink by stretching a little bit upwards, but by not going up onto their toes. So just another video just to show these chicks are trying to get some of the water, but you can see the drinker lines are a bit too high. They want to drink, they want to eat, they want to grow, but the farmer or the producer in this case is not allowing that by having his drinker lines too high. So it's just about getting those basics right. When it comes to flow rates or pressures on your drinker lines, we've got a sort of our recommendations. So week 1, you want to start off around 40 milliliters per minute, and then move your way up by 10 milliliters each week up until the last week where you can go up to 90 milliliters per minute. Okay, these are just guidelines. You also want to make sure that you check your litter moisture underneath the drinker lines and your water consumption graphs before you make any sort of major pressure adjustments. One thing I also want to mention with this, you want to make it easy for the young chicks. High flow rates can be difficult for those chicks. If you have those flow rates too high in the first week, you can make it difficult for them. This is just another video, and hopefully you can see this clearly, but what's happening here is we've got a chick, and it's going from that nipple to this nipple, to this nipple, to moving along, trying to get water, but it doesn't seem like they're getting any water. Your first thought may be, well, there's no water in the system. However, we checked the drinker lines and there was water present. So they keep moving along. They're on the hunt for water. So what's happening here is that the pressure is too high. It was over 100 milliliters per minute. And that's too much pressure for a small, weaker chick to be able to activate that nipple and get its drink of water. And then just measuring your daily water consumptions. This is a very useful tool to use. And basically you just want to be able to plot those daily intakes. You don't need to make sure that they're getting a specific exact amount every single day, but you really want to monitor the trend. And if you see that there's a drop or a rapid increase, that's what you're sort of looking for to try and figure out that something went wrong and there might be a reason for why they've dropped their water intake or they've started to drink excessively. So it's always good to monitor your daily consumptions. Okay, so we want to get good feed intake and we want to get good water intake within those first 24 hours. And the reason for that is, as I spoke about, we want to start that development of the digestive tract. And within the digestive tract, we've got in the intestines, we've got these microvilli, these finger-like structures, which we want to maximize their growth within the first sort of week. And what they're going to do is they're going to absorb all the nutrients later on from the feed and make the bird more efficient, better ADG, better feed conversion at the end of the cycle. If the chick does not get good feed consumption or water consumption, you're going to have suboptimum growth of these microvilli, and the bird's not going to perform very well. So here, there was no feed and water intake after 24 hours compared to this one, which had feed and water intake. You can see nice, thick finger-like structures, high surface area for absorption of nutrients, whereas in this picture, not good development. Okay, so we want about 600% growth of these microvilli in the first week, and that's going to lead to good digestive enzyme production, good absorption area, as I've spoken about, and an effective barrier against bacteria within that first week. So less incidences of leg issues, such as femoral head necrosis or any other bacterial issues later on. A good way to measure if your chicks have got that good early feed and water consumption is by doing crop fill checks. So you want to make sure that they've got nice full crops, feed and water. If it's got water only, it's going to be very soft. You can feel no feed in there. If there's feed only, it's going to be very, very hard. And if it's empty, you're not going to feel anything in the crop. So you want to sample around 100 chicks in the brooding area, sort of all across the brooding area, almost zigzagging your way through the house. And it's a simple check to do. It is a little bit subjective. You know, some people might sort of categorize one as being, you know, full, whereas other people might say that's water only, etc. So it's a bit subjective, but it does give you a good indication. The crop pull checks, what we want to achieve, the main target at 24 hours after placement is 95% feed and water in the crop, but you can also do some earlier checks, and you can see how important after 2 hours or 8 hours, we already want to achieve around 75 to 80% of that crop full. So it's really important to get that good initial feed and water intake. Okay, moving on to lighting, we want a nice and bright, even distribution of lights in the first week, and that's to promote that early and feed water intake that I've spoken about as being so important. So you want it to be at least sort of 25 lux minimum in the brooding area, ideally around 40 lux, and you don't want there to be a wide variation in that intensity. So you want it to vary by less than 20% between the lightest and the darkest area of the house. First 24 hours, you want to give only about 1 hour sleep, and thereafter, you want to give 24 hours of light in the first day, and then thereafter, starting from day 1, you can give 1 hour sleep period. Once the chicks reach around 130 grams or so or more, then you can start to bring in your proper lighting program of around 6 hours or so from 7 days onwards. After day 7, then you can also gradually reduce that light intensity over 4 to 5 days to around about 5 to 20 lux, depending on the legislation. I know in South Africa, you can go a lot lower, so you can achieve that 5 to 10 lux. This is just a nice picture, just to show a nice, bright, even distribution of light, and that's going to lead to good uniformity, good bird distribution, and good early water and feed intake. Okay, air quality and ventilation. So we tend to concentrate a lot on temperature management, but with underventilation, it's going to lead to some issues and poor performance with our broilers. So we don't want to sacrifice ventilation for temperature. You need to make sure that you have enough heating capacity in your houses to allow for sufficient minimum ventilation. You want to get good air quality and good temperature. The main driving force for the ventilation within the brooding period in the first week is carbon dioxide control. So we want a maximum carbon dioxide levels at any time in the chicken shed. You don't want it to be more than 3,000 parts per million. Here's some other guidelines just showing that we want let me just get my pointer. That we wanted good oxygen, low carbon dioxide, low carbon monoxide and ammonia, and we don't want it to be too dusty or too humid. The effects of high carbon dioxide in the first week is you're going to get reduced activity, reduced consumption because of that, reduced dehydration because they're not going to be drinking, lower weight gains, and higher ascites issues as well later in the cycle. So in this house, this was a house in China, and you can see just 3,745 parts per million. The temperatures were fine, everything was good otherwise. However, these chicks were just flat on the ground, lethargic, heads down. They weren't, no activity, and they weren't going to get good gains in the first week. We need to remember that today's broiler is faster growing. So if we just look at the last 10 years between our broiler performance and our performance supplement, we can see that at every age, the birds are a lot heavier than they were 10 years ago. And what we see is some good research is that bigger birds, they require more ventilation because they produce more heat, and they require higher amounts of oxygen compared to smaller birds. So a bigger bird today means we need more ventilation to get them enough oxygen, and we need more ventilation to keep them cooler because they produce more heat by growing so quickly. So it's important to keep your birds in their thermal neutral zone at all times during breeding. So chicks are very sensitive to temperatures in that first week because they've got very poor insulation. And we want to try and maintain those internal chick temperatures at around about 40 to 40.6 degrees Celsius. So we can see here the different behaviors that you might see if the internal body temperatures are too high or too low. So if they get a little bit low, you're going to start to see some huddling and some soft chirping. Once you get very low, 37 to 38 degrees internal, you're going to see large groups of birds huddling, very quiet. And below 36, they're going to be sleeping, almost no noise in the house. And then once the temperatures start to get a little bit too warm, you're going to start to see some wing and leg spreading from the chicks initially. And then you're going to start to, once it gets warmer, you'll start to see some panting, or their beaks will start opening. And then eventually, once it gets much higher, you'll get heavy panting, loud chirping in the house. And then if it gets too high, then they're going to succumb to heat stress. So you want to make sure you can seal up your houses. This is very important. You don't want any cold air coming through the leaks or the cracks in the houses. Make sure you seal your fans, your doors, your tunnel inlets, or any leaks around the house where air might be coming in, cold air might be coming in and dumping onto the floor and onto the litter and floor temperatures. These are extremely critical in that first week. Chicks are in direct contact with the litter and the floor. So with sufficient, you need to make sure you have sufficient preheating prior to placing those chicks to be able to achieve the desired litter and floor temperatures. So we recommend at least 48 hours, depending on your heating systems, to make sure that you achieve those good litter and floor temperatures before the chicks arrive. So they're in direct contact with that litter. And their feet, they can absorb a lot of heat through there or lose a lot of heat through their feet. So if it's cold litter, they're going to get cold feet and the heat's going to be dissipated through their feet and they're going to get dehuddling. So what temperature do the chicks require on the litter? We're looking for between 30 and 32 degrees Celsius is ideal. What temperatures do they require on the concrete floor? We're looking between 28 to 30 degrees Celsius. So you need to measure this before the chicks arrive at the farm and adjust accordingly. You don't want to wait until the chicks arrive and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, my concrete temperatures are 25 degrees and my litter temperatures are 28 degrees. And then you crank up the heating system and then you can cause some other issues for the birds. You need to make sure you achieve it before the chicks arrive on the farm. Make sure you have enough heating capacity. We recommend a minimum of around 0.075 kilowatts per meter cubed of heating capacity to achieve good litter and floor temperatures. Then secondly, your ambient temperature. We've got some temperature guidelines in our broiler management guides on page 54. And what you can see here is that it's age related up until 28 kgs per square meter. And then temperature becomes highly dependent on stocking density thereafter. But for brooding within this first week, what you can see is it's very much influenced by the relative humidity in your house. So if you have higher relative humidity, you need to have lower set point temperatures because what the comfort temperature, what the birds are feeling is going to be a lot warmer because of that higher humidity. And again, if you have lower relative humidity, you need to have higher set point temperatures. So this is very important to remember. You also need to know that there are many thermometers in your house. You know, you've got a house of say 40,000 chicks. A good stockman needs to monitor his bird's behavior and make adjustments on temperature according to what the birds are telling them to keep the birds comfortable. Okay, so these are just guidelines. They're not set in stone. They're a good starting point, but you need to monitor your bird's behavior. So this might be a bit difficult to see, but basically I've got my temperature measurements over here and we've got CO2, which says it's 814 parts per million. That's great. That's well below 3,000. However, we see some chicks huddling. There's low activity and we see some huddling in the house, but the temperature is saying 34 degrees Celsius. So that's really high. However, if we look at the relative humidity, 20%. So this is just a great sort of indication to show you that 34 degrees and 20% in this house, the chicks were huddling. So it wasn't warm enough for them because of that low relative humidity. And that's why it's important to take into consideration. So we want to keep them in their thermal comfort zone. feed consumption is going to decrease by 1.5% for every degree Celsius rise above in thermal comfort temperature. So over here, we've got the amount of energy that the birds need for maintenance, and we want that to be very low, and we still want them to get good energy intake from their feed. And so we have this optimum performance zone where they're using the most energy that they can for growth and development. As soon as it starts getting warmer, they start to use a lot more energy to keep themselves cool. So there's less available for growth and development. And again, as soon as they start getting too cold, they need to use some of that energy to keep themselves warm. You know, you need to be aware of high temperatures. We really sort of concentrate too much on making sure that we get the right litter and floor temperatures, that they're not too cold, that they're not huddling, but we need to make sure that they're not too hot either. So you don't want to overcompensate in your heating, because that can be as equally as bad as it being too cold in your houses. We don't want to see any cob birds panting at any age. So if you see this on your farms, this is 100% of those birds are panting, heavy panting, and they're not going to be happy, and they're going to be using a lot of energy to keep themselves cool, and that's not going to be good for growth and performance. They're going to have high feed conversion. We want to keep them in their thermal comfort zone. So good brooding, chicks should always be doing the following. You want to see some of them drinking, some of them eating, some of them resting, some of them playing, and you want to have them nice and evenly spread throughout the house. You should hear the chicks or hear the birds before you open the door. They shouldn't be too loud, or you shouldn't hear no sound at all. So you want to hear a little bit of chirping before you go into that house. Good management is reacting to the birds as they are the sensors. So quickly in summary, to end, brooding is the most important period. It's all about that first week. You want to make sure you get sort of that good performance there. Better performance in brooding is going to lead to better overall performance at the end of the cycle. You want to achieve good early intakes, good development of the internal organs, the skeletal structure, digestive tract, and that's by achieving a 4.6 times day-old weight by day 7. Remember your 5 principles of brooding. Feed intake. You want to make sure you provide enough feed, 75 grams per chick, and evenly spread around the brooding area. Water intake. This is a main driver for feed intake. You want to provide clean, cool water, and flushing is a big deal. Make sure you flush those lines and you clean those drinker lines between cycles. Lighting, keep it simple, nice and bright, and even intensity in the first week, and you can provide a short rest period after day 1. Air quality, you want to make sure you provide enough oxygen, and you do that by making sure your carbon dioxide levels are below 3,000 parts per million at all times. Temperature, preheat your houses long enough to be able to achieve your good litter and floor temperatures of between 30 and 32 degrees Celsius, and the litter and floor temperatures between 28 and 30 degrees Celsius. And follow our temperature guidelines, and then adjust your inside temperatures based on bird behavior, and avoid overheating your chicks. Cropfill scores. This is a very good tool to let you know if you've got off to a good start within that first 24 hours, or if you need to adjust or make adjustments by adding more feed, or something might be wrong with your water or your water temperature, to make sure that you get those good croppfills. And that's it from me. Thank you.